The helicopter's rotor blades sliced through the thick Afghan night air as Hospital Corpsman Second Class Sarah Martinez checked her medical kit one final time. The rhythmic thumping of the rotors couldn't drown out the nervous energy crackling through the cabin where 12 Navy SEALs sat in full combat gear. Sarah had been assigned to SEAL Team 7 for 8 months now, and while she had earned their respect as a medic, she still felt the weight of being the only woman on a team of elite warriors. Chief Petty Officer Jake Reaper Thompson caught her eye across the cabin and gave her a reassuring nod. At 34, Jake was a veteran of countless missions, his weathered face telling stories of battles fought in the shadows. Sarah had saved his life twice in previous operations, and he trusted her with his team's welfare completely. The mission briefing had been straightforward enough. Infiltrate a Taliban compound in the mountains near the Pakistan border, gather intelligence on a high-value target, and extract before dawn. 5 minutes out, the pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. Sarah felt her stomach tighten, as it always did before insertion. She had joined the Navy at 19, straight out of a small Texas town where her father had taught her to shoot rifles on their family ranch. Her marksmanship skills were exceptional, but she had chosen the medical field because she wanted to save lives, not take them. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now flying into a combat zone where that distinction might become meaningless. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Ghost Williams sat beside her, cleaning his sniper rifle with the methodical precision that had made him legendary within special operations circles. Ghost had taken more confirmed kills than anyone else on the team, his pale blue eyes holding a coldness that made even hardened SEALs uncomfortable. He had initially been skeptical of having a female medic attached to their unit, but Sarah's performance under fire had changed his mind. She was steady, competent, and fearless when treating wounded teammates while bullets flew overhead. The team leader, Lieutenant Commander David Hammer Harrison, studied satellite photos of their target one last time. At 29, he was younger than most of his men but had proven himself through sheer tactical brilliance and an unwavering commitment to bringing everyone home alive. The compound they were hitting sat on a rocky ridge overlooking a valley that served as a major smuggling route. Intelligence suggested that a Taliban commander named Khalil Zadran was using the location to coordinate attacks on coalition forces. The mission was classified as high priority, with orders coming directly from Joint Special Operations Command. Sarah's thoughts drifted to her younger brother Tommy, who was serving as an Army infantryman in Iraq. She carried his picture in her helmet, a reminder of why she did this work. Every wounded soldier she treated could be someone's brother, son, or father. The weight of that responsibility never left her, especially when she was the only thing standing between a critically injured SEAL and death. The helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone, a flat area about 2 miles from the target compound. Sarah could see the mountains rising like black teeth against the star-filled sky. This was her 15th combat mission with SEAL Team 7, and while the fear never completely disappeared, she had learned to channel it into razor-sharp focus. Her medical training had taught her to remain calm under pressure, to make life-or-death decisions in seconds, and to never give up on a patient no matter how dire the situation appeared. LZ coming up hot, the pilot announced, meaning they might face enemy fire during landing. Sarah checked her M4 carbine and adjusted her body armor. While her primary role was medical support, every member of the team was expected to fight when necessary. She had proven capable in previous firefights, but her true value lay in her ability to keep wounded SEALs alive long enough to reach proper medical facilities. Ghost leaned over and spoke quietly into her ear. "Doc, if things go sideways tonight, stay close to me. Your job is to keep us breathing, but I'll make sure you stay breathing too." Sarah nodded, appreciating the veteran sniper's protective instincts. The team had developed an almost familial bond over months of training and combat operations. They looked out for each other because they understood that survival depended on absolute trust and teamwork. The helicopter touched down with barely a sound, its specially modified rotors designed for stealth operations. The SEALs moved out in perfect synchronization, their night vision goggles turning the darkness into a green-tinted world of shadows and heat signatures. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as her boots hit Afghan soil. This was what she had trained for, what she had sworn an oath to do. whatever happened in the next few hours, she would be ready. The team moved in single file through the rocky terrain, Ghost taking point while Sarah maintained her position in the middle of the formation where she could quickly reach any wounded teammate. The compound was still over an hour away on foot, and intelligence reports suggested minimal enemy presence in the area. It should have been a routine operation, the kind of mission that SEAL teams executed dozens of times each month across Afghanistan's lawless frontier regions. Chief Thompson hand-signaled for the team to halt as they approached a narrow canyon that would provide concealment for most of their approach route. Sarah crouched behind a boulder and listened to the night sounds around them. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the wind whistled through rock formations carved by centuries of erosion. These mountains had seen countless armies come and go, from Alexander the Great to the Soviet Union to the current coalition forces. Each had learned that controlling Afghanistan's rugged terrain was like trying to hold water in cupped hands. Lieutenant Commander Harrison checked his GPS coordinates and confirmed they were on schedule. The plan called for them to reach an overwatch position above the target compound by 0200 hours, observe the site for 30 minutes to identify guard positions and patrol patterns, then move in for the assault. Ghost would provide sniper support from a ridge line, while the rest of the team cleared the buildings methodically, searching for intelligence materials and the target individual if he was present. Sarah's medical kit contained everything she might need for trauma surgery in the field: hemostatic agents to stop severe bleeding, chest seals for sucking wounds, airway management tools, and enough morphine to keep a severely wounded soldier comfortable during evacuation. She had practiced treating every conceivable combat injury until her responses became automatic. In previous missions, she had performed emergency surgery by flashlight while mortars exploded nearby, amputated a gangrenous leg with a field saw, and once kept a SEAL with a severed artery alive during a 3-hour firefight by continuously applying pressure to his wound. The team resumed movement, winding through the canyon's narrow confines where the walls rose 60 feet on either side. Sarah felt slightly claustrophobic in the confined space, knowing that if they encountered enemy forces here, there would be nowhere to run. The canyon floor was littered with loose rocks that could easily turn an ankle or create noise that might compromise their position. Each step required careful placement, and the SEALs moved like ghosts through the treacherous terrain. Ghost suddenly raised his fist, the universal signal to freeze. Everyone immediately dropped to the ground and remained motionless while the point man assessed whatever had caught his attention. Through her night vision goggles, Sarah could see him studying something ahead with his rifle scope. Seconds stretched into a full minute before he signaled all clear, and they continued forward. Later, Sarah would learn that he had spotted a shepherd's camp about half a mile away, but determined that the occupants were asleep and posed no immediate threat. As they emerged from the canyon, the target compound became visible on a ridge approximately 1,000 meters ahead. Through her binoculars, Sarah could make out the outline of several buildings surrounded by a low stone wall. Intelligence photos had shown the compound to be relatively modest: a main house, 2 outbuildings, and a small mosque. The Taliban had been using the location as a safe house and meeting place for regional commanders planning attacks against coalition supply convoys traveling the main highway 15 miles to the south. Lieutenant Commander Harrison established their overwatch position behind a cluster of boulders that provided both concealment and clear sightlines to the target. Ghost began setting up his sniper rifle while the rest of the team prepared for the assault phase. Sarah positioned herself where she could see all of her teammates and quickly reach anyone who might be wounded during the operation. Her heart rate had settled into the steady rhythm she associated with combat readiness, that state of controlled alertness where time seemed to slow down and every detail became crystal clear. The compound appeared quiet except for a single guard walking the perimeter with an AK-47 slung over his shoulder. Ghost tracked the man's movements through his rifle scope, noting the timing and pattern of his patrol route. It would take exactly 8 minutes for the guard to complete one circuit of the buildings, which would give the assault team enough time to breach the wall and clear the main house before his next pass brought him back to the entry point. Sarah watched Lieutenant Commander Harrison coordinate final preparations through hand signals and whispered radio communications. This was always the most dangerous moment of any mission, when careful planning met the unpredictable reality of combat operations. No matter how thorough their intelligence or how precise their tactics, something could always go wrong. Her job was to be ready when it did, to keep her teammates alive long enough for the mission to succeed and everyone to make it home safely. The night air carried the scent of wood smoke from cooking fires in distant villages, reminding Sarah that this harsh landscape was home to people who had been fighting for survival long before American forces arrived. She had learned to see beyond the political complexities of the war to focus on her immediate mission, protecting the men who had accepted her as part of their brotherhood. Whatever happened in the next few hours would test every skill she had learned and every ounce of courage she possessed. At exactly 0230 hours, Lieutenant Commander Harrison gave the signal to move. Sarah watched as 8 SEALs began their silent approach to the compound while she and Ghost remained in overwatch positions. The plan was working perfectly until everything went catastrophically wrong in a matter of seconds. As the assault team reached the compound wall, the night exploded into chaos when hidden sentries opened fire from concealed positions that intelligence had completely missed. The first burst of automatic weapons fire caught Petty Officer Rodriguez in the chest, spinning him around and dropping him behind a low stone wall. Sarah saw the muzzle flashes erupting from at least 6 different positions around the compound perimeter, far more enemy fighters than anyone had expected. The Taliban had turned what appeared to be a simple safe house into a carefully prepared killing zone, complete with interlocking fields of fire and pre-positioned ammunition caches. Ghost immediately began engaging targets with his sniper rifle, his suppressed shots dropping enemy fighters with mechanical precision. But for every insurgent he eliminated, 2 more seemed to appear from spider holes and concealed bunkers that had been invisible during their reconnaissance. Sarah's medical training told her that Rodriguez was critically wounded based on how he had fallen, but reaching him would require crossing 50 meters of open ground swept by enemy fire. Chief Thompson's voice crackled through the radio as he tried to coordinate his scattered team while bullets sparked off the rocks around him. 3 more SEALs had been hit in the initial ambush, and the survivors were pinned down behind inadequate cover. The compound had been a trap from the beginning, and intelligence sources had either been compromised or deliberately fed false information. What should have been a routine raid had become a desperate fight for survival against overwhelming odds. Sarah made the decision that would define the rest of the mission. Grabbing her medical kit, she sprinted toward Rodriguez's position while Ghost provided covering fire. Bullets whined past her head and shattered against the rocks as she dove behind the wall where the wounded SEAL lay gasping for breath. Blood was spreading across his chest plate, and his face was already turning pale from blood loss. Sarah ripped open his body armor and saw immediately that a rifle round had penetrated between the ceramic plates, puncturing his lung and causing a pneumothorax. Working by feel in the darkness, Sarah inserted a chest tube to reinflate the collapsed lung while Rodriguez struggled to remain conscious. The procedure required absolute steadiness despite the bullets impacting inches from her position. She had practiced this same technique dozens of times during medical training, but never while enemy fighters were actively trying to kill her patient and herself. Rodriguez's breathing improved immediately as the pressure was relieved from his chest cavity, but he needed immediate evacuation to survive. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. 2 more SEALs had been wounded trying to reach better firing positions, and ammunition was running dangerously low. Ghost had expended half his rifle ammunition and was switching between targets so quickly that his barrel was beginning to overheat. The enemy had positioned themselves in a horseshoe formation that allowed them to pour fire into the compound area from 3 directions simultaneously, making movement virtually impossible. Sarah keyed her radio and called for immediate medical evacuation, knowing that their original extraction plan was now worthless. The helicopter would need to land under fire, if it could land at all given the enemy positions commanding the only suitable landing zones. She began treating a second wounded SEAL who had crawled to her position with a severe leg wound, using a tourniquet to stop the arterial bleeding that would have killed him within minutes. Lieutenant Commander Harrison realized that conventional tactics weren't going to save his team. The enemy had prepared this ambush too carefully, and his men were trapped in a position where they could neither advance nor retreat safely. He made the desperate decision to call in close air support, even though the enemy positions were so close to his own men that any air strike would be extremely dangerous. The alternative was watching his entire team die piecemeal as they ran out of ammunition. Ghost's rifle suddenly went silent, and Sarah looked up to see the veteran sniper clutching his shoulder where blood was seeping through his uniform. A Taliban sniper had finally managed to wound the man who had been single-handedly holding off multiple enemy assault attempts. Without Ghost's precision fire keeping the insurgents at bay, the enemy began massing for what looked like a final coordinated attack that would overrun the SEALs' positions. The wounded sniper tried to continue fighting, but his damaged shoulder made it impossible to maintain the steady shooting position required for accurate long-range shots. Sarah could see the frustration and pain in his eyes as he struggled to perform his critical mission while blood loss weakened his normally rock-steady hands. The team's most effective weapon had been neutralized at the worst possible moment. Sarah looked at Ghost's rifle lying beside him and made a split-second decision that would change everything. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 8 years old, starting with a .22 rifle and progressing to high-powered hunting rifles by the time she was 12. She had been shooting competitively in high school and could consistently hit targets at distances that impressed even experienced marksmen. But she had never killed another human being, and the thought of deliberately taking a life went against everything she believed as a medical professional. The choice became clear when she saw Taliban fighters beginning to move toward the wounded SEALs' positions for what would certainly be a massacre. Her oath as a medic was to preserve life, but sometimes that meant taking life to protect the lives of those she was sworn to defend. Sarah picked up Ghost's rifle and quickly adjusted the scope settings based on her estimate of range and wind conditions. The rifle felt familiar in her hands despite being a different model from what she had learned on. The fundamentals were the same: proper breathing, sight alignment, trigger control, and follow-through. Sarah identified the enemy sniper who had wounded Ghost, a figure barely visible in a window of the compound's main building. The distance was approximately 400 meters, a challenging shot under ideal conditions, but extremely difficult given the darkness, stress, and ongoing firefight. Sarah controlled her breathing and squeezed the trigger during her natural respiratory pause, just as her father had taught her years ago on their Texas ranch. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and through the scope she saw the enemy sniper jerk backward and disappear from the window. Her first combat kill had been clean and instantaneous, eliminating the threat that had been systematically picking off her teammates. The psychological impact of that first shot was immediate and profound. Sarah felt a strange disconnection from her normal identity as a healer, as if she were watching someone else operate the rifle with deadly precision. But there was no time for moral reflection because more targets presented themselves, and her wounded teammates needed protection. She began engaging enemy fighters with the methodical accuracy that had made Ghost so effective. Within minutes, Sarah had eliminated 3 more insurgents and wounded several others badly enough to remove them from the fight. Her shooting was creating confusion among the Taliban forces, who couldn't understand how their carefully planned ambush was being disrupted by accurate fire from an unexpected direction. They had planned for Ghost's capabilities, but had no intelligence about a second sniper supporting the SEAL team. The tactical balance began shifting as Sarah's rifle work allowed the unwounded SEALs to reposition and consolidate their defenses. Chief Thompson was able to reach another wounded teammate and drag him to safety while Sarah kept enemy heads down with precisely placed shots. Lieutenant Commander Harrison coordinated a fighting withdrawal toward a more defensible position where they could establish a proper perimeter while waiting for extraction. Ghost watched in amazement as the young medic operated his rifle with skills that rivaled his own. He had never suspected that the quiet woman who had saved so many lives possessed such lethal capabilities. Through his pain and blood loss, he felt a mixture of pride and professional respect for someone who could transition so seamlessly between healing and killing when circumstances demanded both. Sarah's medical training served her well as a sniper because both disciplines required absolute calmness under pressure, precise hand-eye coordination, and the ability to make critical decisions in seconds. She found herself applying the same methodical approach she used for emergency surgery to the problem of eliminating threats to her patients. Each shot was calculated to achieve maximum tactical effect while conserving ammunition for the long fight ahead. The enemy's initial advantage was evaporating as their casualties mounted and their positions became known. Sarah had identified the locations of key insurgent leaders by observing how other fighters responded to their commands, then systematically eliminated those leaders to disrupt enemy coordination. The Taliban force was beginning to lose cohesion as their command structure collapsed under her precise fire. As the first hint of dawn appeared on the eastern horizon, Sarah realized that she had fundamentally changed during the night's fighting. The young woman who had joined the Navy to save lives had discovered that sometimes the best way to preserve life was to take it from those who threatened the innocent. She was still a medic first, but now she was also a warrior capable of protecting her patients with deadly force when medical skills weren't enough. As dawn light began creeping across the Afghan mountains, Sarah had eliminated 8 enemy fighters and wounded several others, but the tactical situation remained desperate. The Taliban forces had regrouped and were preparing for a final assault that would overwhelm the decimated SEAL team through sheer numbers. Radio intercepts indicated that enemy reinforcements were moving toward their position from multiple directions, turning what had been an ambush into a full-scale siege. Sarah's ammunition supply was running critically low, with fewer than 20 rounds remaining in her magazines. Ghost had lost consciousness from blood loss despite her emergency medical treatment, and 3 other SEALs required immediate surgical intervention that she couldn't provide under combat conditions. Lieutenant Commander Harrison estimated they had perhaps 30 minutes before being completely surrounded by superior forces with no hope of escape or rescue. The situation became even more dire when their radio operator reported that the scheduled extraction helicopter had been shot down by a surface-to-air missile 20 miles away. All crew members were dead, and no backup aircraft could reach their position before the enemy reinforcements arrived. The SEAL team was effectively stranded in hostile territory with wounded teammates who couldn't be moved and insufficient ammunition to hold their position much longer. Sarah made the decision to attempt something that had never been tried in special operations history. Using her knowledge of battlefield medicine and her newly discovered sniper skills, she would conduct a series of precision strikes designed not just to kill enemy fighters, but to create maximum psychological impact on the surviving insurgents. The goal was to break their will to continue fighting by demonstrating capabilities they couldn't understand or counter effectively. Her first target was an enemy commander who had been coordinating the attack from a position behind a large boulder approximately 600 meters away. Sarah had observed him through her scope for several minutes, noting how other fighters looked to him for direction and how his commands influenced their movements. Eliminating him would disrupt enemy coordination while sending a clear message about the range and accuracy of her rifle. The shot required compensating for wind speed, bullet drop over the extended distance, and the target's partial concealment behind cover. Sarah calculated the lead time needed to hit a moving target and controlled her breathing to achieve the steadiness required for such a difficult shot. When she squeezed the trigger, the bullet traveled for almost a full second before finding its mark with devastating precision. The enemy commander's death created immediate chaos among the Taliban fighters, who couldn't understand how their leader had been killed from such an impossible distance. Sarah followed up by targeting the insurgent who tried to take command, dropping him with another long-range shot that further demoralized the remaining fighters. The psychological effect was exactly what she had hoped for: confusion, fear, and hesitation replacing the confidence they had shown during their initial attack. With the enemy temporarily disorganized, Sarah began treating the most critically wounded SEAL while maintaining her sniper watch through her peripheral vision. Petty Officer Martinez had taken multiple shrapnel wounds from a grenade explosion and was showing signs of severe internal bleeding. Sarah performed an emergency blood transfusion using plasma expanders from her medical kit, a procedure that required absolute steadiness while bullets continued flying around their position. The work was painstakingly slow because she had to interrupt her medical procedures every few minutes to engage new threats with her rifle. Each time an enemy fighter tried to advance on their position, Sarah would drop her medical instruments, acquire the target through her scope, and eliminate the threat with a single well-placed shot. Then, she would immediately return to treating wounded teammates as if switching between two completely different professions. Chief Thompson observed this seamless transition between roles with amazement and growing respect. He had served with dozens of combat medics during his 20-year career, but none had ever demonstrated such lethal effectiveness while maintaining their medical duties. Sarah was single-handedly keeping the enemy at bay while preventing her wounded teammates from dying of their injuries, performing two crucial missions simultaneously under impossible conditions. The enemy's next assault came from three directions simultaneously, with insurgents using covering fire and movement techniques that indicated professional military training. Sarah realized that foreign fighters had joined the Taliban force, probably Pakistani or Chechen veterans with experience fighting coalition forces. These men were more disciplined and tactically sophisticated than the local insurgents she had been engaging throughout the night. Sarah adapted her tactics accordingly, focusing on disrupting the enemy's coordination rather than simply eliminating individual fighters. She targeted their communications equipment first, destroying radio sets and killing operators to blind the attacking force. Then, she systematically eliminated their automatic weapons crews, forcing the assault teams to rely on less effective small arms fire. Finally, she began targeting their leaders, using her medical knowledge of human anatomy to ensure that each shot was immediately fatal. The combination of precise marksmanship and tactical understanding proved devastating to enemy morale. Foreign fighters who had survived combat against Russian forces in Chechnya and coalition troops in Iraq found themselves facing an opponent they couldn't locate, understand, or effectively counter. Sarah was fighting from positions they hadn't identified, using techniques they couldn't recognize, and achieving results that seemed impossible given their numerical superiority. Lieutenant Commander Harrison used the confusion created by Sarah's sniper fire to reposition his remaining effective fighters into a tighter defensive perimeter. They moved the wounded SEALs to a position that offered better protection while maintaining clear fields of fire toward likely enemy approach routes. Sarah provided covering fire during this movement, dropping three insurgents who tried to take advantage of the team's temporary vulnerability. As the morning sun rose higher, Sarah noticed that enemy fire was becoming less coordinated and more sporadic. Her psychological warfare was working as demoralized Taliban fighters began withdrawing from positions they had held throughout the night. Some were abandoning their weapons and fleeing toward the mountains, while others were arguing among themselves about whether to continue the attack or retreat entirely. The turning point came when Sarah identified the location of the enemy's ammunition cache, a concealed bunker where they had stockpiled rockets and machine gun ammunition for the extended siege. Using her knowledge of explosive materials gained during medical training, she placed several precise shots into the bunker's ventilation system, causing a secondary explosion that destroyed most of their heavy weapons and seriously wounded several key fighters. The massive explosion sent a mushroom cloud of smoke and debris into the morning sky, visible for miles in every direction. The psychological impact on the remaining enemy fighters was immediate and decisive. Many began fleeing the area entirely, convinced that they were facing some kind of supernatural opponent who could destroy their most secure positions with impossible accuracy. Sarah used this opportunity to provide more intensive medical care to her wounded teammates while maintaining intermittent sniper fire to discourage any thoughts of renewing the attack. Ghost had regained consciousness and was able to provide tactical advice even though he couldn't operate his rifle effectively. His respect for Sarah's abilities was evident in his voice as he coached her through advanced sniper techniques that could help her conserve ammunition while maintaining psychological pressure on the enemy. The radio crackled with an unexpected transmission from a coalition quick reaction force that had been dispatched when the original extraction helicopter failed to report in. A squadron of Apache attack helicopters was inbound to their position, with estimated arrival in 15 minutes. Sarah's job now was to mark remaining enemy positions for the airstrike, while ensuring that her own team's location was clearly identified to prevent friendly fire incidents. Using colored smoke grenades from her kit, Sarah began marking significant enemy positions while providing precise grid coordinates to the incoming pilots. Her dual role as forward observer and sniper allowed her to give extremely accurate targeting information based on direct observation of enemy movements throughout the engagement. The helicopter crews would be able to complete the destruction of the Taliban force with surgical precision. As the sound of rotor blades grew louder in the distance, Sarah felt a complex mixture of relief, exhaustion, and professional satisfaction. She had discovered capabilities within herself that she never knew existed, transforming from a dedicated healer into one of the most effective combat snipers in special operations history. The young woman who had joined the Navy to save lives had learned that sometimes the most effective way to preserve life was to take it from those who threatened the innocent. The remaining enemy fighters began a hasty retreat toward the mountains as the Apache helicopters appeared on the horizon like mechanical angels of death. Sarah's long night of combat was finally coming to an end, but she knew that her life and identity had been permanently changed by the experience. She was still a medic first and foremost, but now she was also a warrior capable of protecting her patients with deadly precision when medical skills alone weren't sufficient for their survival. The Apache helicopters arrived like thunder rolling across the mountains, their 30mm cannons and Hellfire missiles making short work of the remaining Taliban positions. Sarah provided precise targeting coordinates for each strike, watching through her rifle scope as the enemy force that had nearly destroyed her team was systematically eliminated by overwhelming firepower. Within minutes, the siege was over and the threat neutralized, but the real battle for Sarah was just beginning. Medical evacuation helicopters landed 20 minutes later, their crews working frantically to stabilize the wounded SEALs for transport to the military hospital at Bagram Air Base. Sarah supervised the loading of each patient, providing detailed medical reports to the flight medics while maintaining her professional composure despite physical and emotional exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, engaged in continuous combat for 8 hours, and had killed more enemy fighters than some infantry soldiers eliminated during entire deployments. The flight back to base passed in a blur of medical procedures and worried monitoring of vital signs. Sarah continued treating her teammates throughout the journey, adjusting for drips, monitoring breathing, and providing pain relief to men who were suffering but alive because of her skills with both medical instruments and precision rifle fire. Ghost drifted in and out of consciousness, but when he was awake, his eyes followed Sarah with an expression of profound respect and gratitude. At Bagram, the wounded SEALs were rushed into surgery while Sarah provided detailed briefings to the medical teams about the treatments she had administered in the field. Her documentation was meticulous despite the combat conditions, allowing the surgeons to continue her work without dangerous gaps in medical care. All 5 wounded men would survive, though several faced months of rehabilitation before returning to active duty. The debriefing process began immediately after Sarah had cleaned up and changed into fresh uniforms. Intelligence officers wanted every detail about the mission, particularly how the Taliban had been able to prepare such an effective ambush despite careful planning and reconnaissance. Sarah's account of the enemy's tactics, equipment, and apparent training levels provided crucial information for future operations in the region. Lieutenant Commander Harrison's after-action report focused heavily on Sarah's unprecedented performance during the engagement. He documented her transition from medic to sniper, her elimination of multiple enemy targets at extended ranges, and her ability to maintain medical duties while conducting precision rifle fire. The report concluded that her actions had saved the lives of every team member and prevented a catastrophic defeat that could have compromised ongoing operations throughout the region. Word of Sarah's heroics spread quickly through the special operations community, where her story became legendary almost overnight. A female medic who had eliminated 12 enemy fighters while simultaneously treating 5 critically wounded teammates challenged every assumption about gender roles in combat units. Senior officers who had opposed women in special operations were forced to reconsider their positions in light of her undeniable effectiveness under the most extreme conditions imaginable. Sarah struggled with the sudden attention and acclaim from fellow service members who wanted to hear first-hand accounts of her combat experience. She remained uncomfortable with being praised for killing people, even enemy fighters who had been trying to murder her teammates. Her medical training emphasized the sanctity of human life, and She wrestled with the moral complexity of having taken lives to preserve lives, even though every rational analysis confirmed that her actions had been necessary and justified. Ghost recovered from his wounds after 6 weeks in the hospital and immediately requested Sarah's assignment to his newly formed sniper training program. He had recognized that her unique combination of medical knowledge, natural marksmanship ability, and psychological toughness made her an ideal instructor for teaching advanced precision shooting techniques to special operations personnel. The program would be the first to formally train female snipers for deployment with elite units. The psychological evaluation required for continued special operations duty revealed that Sarah had adapted remarkably well to the trauma of combat, though she continued to struggle with the ethical implications of her new role as a shooter. The psychologist noted that her medical background provided a framework for understanding violence as a tool for preserving life rather than simply destroying it, which helped her process the experience in a psychologically healthy manner. Sarah's family back in Texas struggled to understand how their daughter had become one of the military's most effective snipers while serving as a medic. Her father felt pride mixed with concern when he read news reports about her heroics, recognizing that the shooting skills he had taught her for hunting and sport had been transformed into instruments of war. Her mother worried about the psychological toll of killing, even in defense of others, and feared that the daughter who returned home would be fundamentally changed by her experiences. The Navy recognized Sarah's exceptional performance with a Silver Star, the third highest decoration for valor in combat. The citation read in part, Hospital Corpsman Martinez displayed extraordinary heroism while engaged in combat operations against an armed enemy force. Her selfless dedication to duty and remarkable courage under fire saved the lives of her teammates and prevented a tactical disaster. Her actions reflect great credit upon herself, the United States Navy, and the naval special warfare community. 6 months later, Sarah was promoted to Hospital Corpsman First Class and assigned to the Naval Special Warfare Training Center as a primary instructor for combat medical training. Her curriculum included advanced trauma surgery, battlefield psychology, and precision marksmanship training that prepared other medics to fill multiple roles during special operations missions. Students learned that modern warfare required medical personnel who could fight as well as heal. The lessons learned from Sarah's mission influenced tactical doctrine throughout the special operations community. Units began cross-training their medics in advanced marksmanship while teaching their shooters basic medical skills, creating more versatile teams capable of adapting to unexpected situations. The rigid role specialization that had previously characterized special operations gave way to a more flexible approach that recognized the value of multi-skilled personnel. Sarah's story became required reading at military academies and professional schools where future officers studied leadership under extreme stress. Her ability to maintain both medical and tactical effectiveness simultaneously while making life-or-death decisions in seconds exemplified the kind of adaptability and mental toughness that modern warfare demanded from special operations personnel. 3 years after the mission that made her famous, Sarah was selected for Officer Candidate School and commissioned as an ensign in the Navy Medical Corps. Her first assignment was developing training programs for female personnel entering previously male-only specialties within special operations. The military was finally acknowledging that gender was less important than competence, courage, and commitment when lives were on the line. Ghost, now a Master Chief Petty Officer, served as her mentor throughout this transition from enlisted medic to commissioned officer. Their partnership had evolved from that night in Afghanistan when she had picked up his rifle and discovered capabilities neither of them knew she possessed. Together, they revolutionized how the military thought about gender roles, specialization, and the kind of person suited for the most demanding missions. The compound where the ambush occurred was eventually destroyed by coalition forces, but Sarah's actions there continued to influence military training and doctrine years later. Her story proved that heroism could emerge from the most unexpected sources when ordinary people were pushed beyond their perceived limitations by extraordinary circumstances. The young woman who had joined the Navy to save lives had learned that sometimes the most effective way to preserve life was to take it from those who threatened the innocent. Sarah never forgot that night in the Afghan mountains when she had been forced to choose between her ideals as a healer and her duty to protect the wounded men under her care. The choice had transformed her from a medic into a warrior, but it had also taught her that true strength sometimes required embracing contradictions and accepting that moral complexity was an inescapable part of serving others in an imperfect world where good people sometimes had to do terrible things for righteous reasons.